Welcome to this NZ MPTA training video on how to download, set up and use Autorep Plus. The first thing you need to realise is that Autorep Plus is a Windows-based desktop application. It's not a phone application. First thing you need to do is download and set up. We'll send you a link for that purpose. When you get the link, download it and run the application. This will load Autorep Plus and all the required data tables onto your device. So click set up and it will begin to run. You might be prompted with the window below which says don't run. Click on more info and then you will see this window which says run anyway. So you can click safely on run anyway. The application will download now onto your desktop. Once the application is open, you select your company, enter your email address and click on Sync Data. Click Yes to proceed and OK to the next prompt. The application will then appear on your desktop and you can double click on that icon to open the application. Now enter your username and password to log in. Tick Remember Me to save your username and password. You won't have to enter it again. Some users, admin users and company management, may have an online version. The version you'll have as a tester is an offline version, so it will run without an internet connection. The online version will run with an internet connection, but is a little slower, so we don't suggest you use that as a matter of course. Once you've logged in, you'll see this screen, and I'm now going to take you through what each screen means to you. So I have Autorep Plus already loaded on my laptop. I'll double click to open. And you'll see that my login details have already been remembered. I'm an admin user, so I can see the online version, but I don't wish to use that, so I'll leave that box unticked. I'll now log in. You'll see on this screen we can view tests, we can create new tests, we can synchronize our tests to the cloud where they'll be stored safely, and we can download tests from the cloud, which I'll explain later, change your password, log on, log off. You'll see I've already got a test entered here. I'm just going to delete that one so we don't need to worry about it. A couple of other things you can do. You can search for tests on a date range or on a keyword. So if you've done a test for Joe Blow, you can put in below and search on that and that test will appear. You can also search for supply number, for example. So just enter it and hit search and the application will go off and find that test for you. So let's take you through how to use the app now. It's pretty straightforward, but there are a few little quirks that you need to understand which will help you get a really good result. First of all, we're going to create a new test. You'll see the first screen that comes up is the farm details and your own details. And down the left-hand side, you can see the different screens that we're going to be using. And we'll work our way through those as we do this test. Some of the information is hardwired in and it's based on your login. So you won't be able to change that. We can enter the calibration expiry dates for our equipment. So let's do that as a starter. So my airflow meter, it expires in March the 3rd, 2023, and so does all my other equipment. So I can just quickly enter that, and we're done. Test date will appear automatically, but if you're entering it from another date, again, you can select another date for that entry. I'm going to enter the farm owner's name. Absolutely have to have that. It's a mandatory field. We can enter any other detail we have about the farm, email addresses, mobile phone numbers, etc. We can enter the dairy company. We have some preloaded for you, but not all. If we don't have it, you can just type it in. Same for the supply number. The plant type is another mandatory field. So what is it? Is it a highline herringbone, a lowline, a rotary? So let's say this is a highline herringbone. Plant size, again mandatory. Without that cluster number, a lot of the calculations can't work. So we absolutely have to have this field. So let's say it's just a small 20 highline herringbone. For pulsators, what will we choose? So let's say it's just it's a D-Level EP 100B. That'll do. And we've got 20 of those. And 2x2. Now we go on to the rest of the plant configuration. So let's say, yes, we do have ACRs. Yes, they do have bale gates. There's no milk meters. The liners are conventional, not vented. Yes, we have a flushing pulsation system. So again, this is a mandatory field because the presence of one of these systems determines whether we're looking at the cleaning reserve or the standard effective reserve. There's a chance to enter some more detail here for the plant setup. We absolutely have to have the milk line size. We'll say this is a 100mm milk line. Again, that's all about calculating the cleaning reserve. We won't worry about the rest of that. So that's the first part of our detail setup for this test. Hit next, you'll see there's a little reminder, are you sure you've got the plant size right? So that's just to make sure that cluster number is correct before we carry on. This is the second page of the setup detail. We use select pumps, regulators, and other detail about the milking machine. So let's say this plant's got a mass port, vacuum pump, let's call it a super. It's got a 5.5 kilowatt motor. It's not driving the milk pump. The regulator type is a, what should we say, a vacuum master. Our releaser milk pump is a Flomax. It's a centrifugal 1.5 say, and naturally we have a 1.5 kilowatt motor. This next part's quite important. This is where we ascertain what other ancillary equipment is on this milking machine that we haven't already noted on the first page. So let's say, just for argument's sake, that there is something else, that it's a backing gate, and it's clearly connected to the milk system in some manner. I'm not sure how, but don't worry about that. So we've got one of those. We'll select one. And we'll also say there's a vacuum operated teat sprayer connected to the vacuum system. Because that's a listed item, we don't have to tick other and select the number. So now we've got everything we need to know about this milking machine to successfully carry out a test. And we hit save. Really important to hit save every time you see it, otherwise you're doomed to losing the data you've entered and you have to go back and start again. So please get very used to hitting save. Right, you'll see now that we've hit save, the next form is opened up. So we can use this form. If we don't want to use that form or don't need to, we can go to any other form we choose just by selecting on the left-hand side. But we will do a visual test. And it's pretty standard. You'll recognize the fields from the paper form or from the old version of Autorep. One little quirk for this new version is the way we select ticks or crosses. So some testers just cross the faults and don't tick the boxes. Some tick every box and put a cross where there's a fault. That's really your call. The way to do it, in Autorep is, I'll start down here actually, one click on your cursor is a tick, the second click is a cross, and the third click takes you back to the beginning, so it gets rid of anything if you think you need to change your mind. So I'll get rid of these ones, and let's see what sort of faults we have. Let's say we've got no guards, and you'll see over here you can actually select a comment, so guard not fitted, or if you don't wish to, you can leave those blank. It's entirely up to you, as long as you cover that off in your recommendations later on. Let's also say there's a loose intercept connection, so again, intercept connection is loose. So you just carry on through the checklist, ticking or crossing, or just crossing as I mentioned. I'll now find some fields that are slightly different. In this field, it's not actually a fault field, it's a data collection field. So in this case, we're talking about the long pulse tubes. We'll say they're twin, and we'll say they're 9mm, for example. So that's just data for later use when you're testing here. And there are more of those. You'll see them in other fields. Here's one here, long loop tube, diameter 19, say. Right, so we'll work our way through our visual checklist. We've reached the end. You'll see the save box here, so we'll save that. And that's our visual fault checklist complete. We're now ready to go on and do our vacuum and airflow readings. Again, same process, just entering your readings as you do them. So let's say our working vacuum is 47. Our nominal working vacuum is 47, so we're spot on. It's now calculated the vacuum regulation deviation based on those two readings, and tick that box because it's within standard. The working vacuum at the regulator, we'll say they're all 47. If it's a variable speed drive, this reading you will do later on, so you don't have to complete that now. We now move on to section 2 of the test, effective reserve. So I've measured that, and I'll say it's 950. You'll see that Autorep has calculated the standard required effective reserve as 600 and the required cleaning reserve as 1919 litres. And it's crossed the box because it's less than the cleaning reserve. Remember, we said this has a flushing pulsation system, so the box is crossed because our measured reserve is less than our cleaning reserve. So we can go on and put in some more readings. Just do it simply so that we don't get too confusing. So these are all 950, so there's no regulation loss. This is also 950, so no regulation leakage. But if there was, say if I put in 1100 here, you'll see that the system has calculated the regulation loss and faulted that because it's too high. So I'll just go back and put my 950 back in, and off we go again. Regulation characteristics, so this is pretty straightforward. Put your readings in. So there's nothing going on here. And you'll see the system's calculated that the fall-off vacuum drop is 2, undershoot 0, overshoot 1, and all okay. The airline vacuum drop, remember these are done at -2 kPa, so we'll have here, say, let's 44.9, 45, and 45. So again, those are all okay. Click next. We're on to the next set of tests. So the working vacuum in the milk system, we'll say that is 47. So spot on. This test is not a mandatory one, so I won't fill in those boxes, but you get the idea anyway. Vacuum gauge, so comparing the farmer's gauge to our test gauge, and we'll say these are all okay. So farmer's gauge, matches our gauge. If it didn't, I could put in 6 there, and you'll see there's a 6 kPa variation and a fault's being recorded. Now we're on to testing our vacuum pump, and we'll say that the minimum speed, it's not a variable speed drive, so we'll say the minimum and maximum the same. I'll put in 769. So that's within the speed range for a Massport Super, and we'll say it's producing 1620 litres, and again that's within the range. If I said it was producing 1000 litres, the system again checks that pump against the standard expectation and crosses the box if it's not met. So I'll put that 1620, I think it was, back in, and off we go again. Exhaust pressure, so it's 0, so no restrictions on the exhaust. And now we're on to our airflow start, otherwise known as working vacuum, our pump capacity at working vacuum. So let's say it's 1720. Hit next again, and now we're doing our leakage and consumption testing. So we'll say 1640. So we've got 80 litres of leakage in the vacuum system, so 1630, 10 litres of leakage in the milking system. We do have ACRs, so let's say that's 1580 within spec. Cluster here, what do we want for cluster here about? Let's say 1440, again within spec. Remember we did say there was some ancillary equipment, so if we put in the same as our previous reading, there was 0 leakage through that ancillary equipment. If I say it's 1400, you'll see the system again is calculated that's outside of the expected range. So pulsation, let's say 860, it's all good, and I'll create a fault here. So remember, this is our teat sprayer that's hooked up to our vacuum system, so I'll say it's 800, 60 litres leaking, too much, fault recorded. Our pulsation chamber vacuum, we can say that's 40, 45, difference is 2, that's a tick. And these last two are our final 2 check tests, which we carry out just before we leave the dairy to make sure everything's back the way it should be. Hit save, and now all of those readings have been saved, and you'll see that the next form that you might want to use has opened up. So this is the additional test form, which we do have in paper format as well. These are just for any additional tests you might want to do. So if there was, say you wanted to test the teat sprayer separately, you can record that reading here. Remember we got 60. Any bubble testing or leakage testing on the releaser. If there was a diaphragm pump, you can enter the number of heads, what speed it was doing. See, that's too slow for our milking machine. If I put 38, still too slow. You get the idea, whether it's powered separately and what our kPa readings were on the releaser. Some of these you can tick or cross yourself, so there's no standard in the standards book as such. You can actually just follow the same methodology we use for the visual faults checklist. So we'll just get rid of those. For our vacuum pump, we can put in our oiling rate here. So I don't know what the oiling rate would be for a Massport Super running at 769 RPM, but let's say we've got 10 drops. Oops, clearly not enough. I'll save that. So now the Pulsator test result form has opened, and some testers will use this. Many testers have a device that creates its own report, so you might not want to use this. But for those who do want to use this form, there's just one little quirk that you'll need to know, and that's creating rows for the number of pulsators you want to record. So you may want to record just the faulty ones, or you might want to record every pulsator that you test. The way to do that is select the rows you need for the number of pulsators you want to record. So I'm just going to record one faulty one. So I enter 1 here, create row, and you'll see my rows being created for me. And now I can go ahead and enter my results for that pulsator. We'll say the faulty one was unit 3. Its rate was, let's say, 70. Pulsation chamber vacuum 47 on each side. The B phase was 30 on each side. The D phase was 20 on each side. And the ratio was 65. So you can go on and enter your individual percentages for A, B, C, D phase, but you don't have to. So you can see now that the system has faulted this pulsator. I think it's based on that rate. I think it's too high. It's also calculated the limp. So if I change side 2 to 60, you'll see the limp has changed. If I change it to 59, it's changed again. So it's automatically calculating the limp. It's looking at the standards for this pulsator that are in the standards book and comparing my reading against that pulsator's standards. So we can instantly see there's a reason for the fault for that pulsator. The other thing you need to do, because we are interested in the rate and ratio variation between pulsators, you'll need to record the fastest rate. So in this case it's 70, and if, say, all the rest of my pulsators were sitting at 60, you can see again the system has faulted this because that range is too wide. If I said they were all 60, you'll see now it's a tick. I'll go back and put my 70 in. And the same for the ratio. So I think the standard for this pulsator is 65. So if I say we got between 67 and 63, that's okay. If I got 70 and 63, that range is too wide. Again, the system faults it. So really simple. It's based purely on way back here when you entered the Milky Machine details what pulsator we selected, and the system does the rest for you. The next form works in exactly the same way. So this is the individual cluster test form. So remember, if your cluster error admission reading is outside the range expected for the Milky Machine, you are expected to do either individual or grouped cluster tests. So again, I'm going to do one. So I'll create one row. It's unit number 4. I got total error admission, so 15, too high. I got leakage in the cluster of 5, too high. And it's calculated the the final one for me and faulted those. So there's an issue with that unit. Again, remember to hit save. That fault's saved. And this is where it gets a little bit different now from what you would normally do on your paper form. So on the fault summary page, everything that's been faulted as we worked our way through those forms has now appeared here. So remember we crossed 2 boxes on our visual checklist. Those 2 faults have appeared here, and we can record what's our recommendation for those. So fix the interceptor connection and replace guards sharp. The difference now is you would normally rate each of those separately. In Autorep Plus, we have to group them and rate them as a group. So I've got 2 faults here. I choose which is the most serious of them, and that will be my rating for this group. So that guard is critical. That means that whole box is critical. And we go through and do the same thing. So make a recommendation for the effective reserve, for the vacuum gauge error, etc., etc. Rate it. Major. We had another fault for the vacuum pump. Oil rate. Save that. So that's all now saved. And you'll see that we can now look at the different reports that Autorep will produce for you. So the first one, and probably the most important one, is the test report itself. So we'll open that up. And you'll see this has been populated with all your readings. The standards have been calculated and entered, and any faults have been noted here. So this form is done automatically for you. Down the bottom here we can see the regulation characteristics. That was all okay. Remember we put in a low oiling rate for this vacuum pump. That's appeared as a fault here. The other thing of note is that on the additional test form for paper-based users, we do a calculated standard pump capacity, which is the total of these standards, and we use that number if we're going to fit a new vacuum pump. That's the number that we would install it to. So we're looking for that sort of airflow rate from a new vacuum pump for this milking machine. This has been calculated automatically for you, so you no longer have to worry about doing that. So I can quickly check my report. It all looks good to me. I'll close that one. I can open my visual checklist, and you can see those 2 faults that I mentioned are there. Close that one. The additional report, I ended up not entering anything in that, so that's empty. Cluster airflow. Here's our one cluster that we did check. Pulsation. Same thing. Here's the numbers we entered. So we have a report for every form, and the last one of course is the summary, and you'll see it's slightly different. So the faults are color coded. So critical is red, anything major is yellow, and anything minor is green. You'll see that the key here shows why they were rated that way. You'll also see that the comments that we made, fix the interceptor connection, replace the guards on the vacuum pump shaft, now appear on the summary report, including the gobbledygook one that I did for that section. So it's just a matter of putting all your comments in. I see I didn't make a comment on the vacuum pump oil flow rate, so I missed that. I can go back and fix it. So that's the system. I think just one last thing that we do need to cover off, and that's the syncing and storage of tests. So I can go back and I can see that that test now sits in my test reports area. It's saved solely on my laptop. So if my laptop gets broken or stolen, that information is lost. So what we're recommending is that when you get back to your workplace and you have an internet connection, hit sync. The system will say, yes, there are unsynced tests. Do you want to sync them before closing? So this is referring to the test I've just done. I'll say yes. And now you see that test is syncing to the cloud. It will be secure there. It's backed up every day by our cloud service. So in effect, your test information can't be lost. And the importance of that is really around breakages and theft of devices. Just wait for that to complete, and there it goes, it's gone. So now that test is on my device and it's in the cloud. If I accidentally delete it, it's still available to me. So I can get my admin user to download it. I mentioned before that we have downloaded my test. Currently, what this does is that if I hit it, it will download all of the tests I've saved to the cloud. We can't at this point select individual tests, but we're hoping to add that to a next version of Autorep. So if I lose my laptop, I get a new laptop. Clearly I have none of my tests on that laptop. I reload Autorep, I log on, I hit download my tests, and all the tests that I have stored in the cloud can then reload back to my device, and I have my history back and available, and I carry on. So that's Autorep Plus in a nutshell. I hope you find it useful. I'm absolutely certain, because it's brand new, there will be bugs and there will be lots of suggestions for improvements. Please forward those through to the MPTA, and we will fix bugs and make improvements as they come available. So happy testing.